Hey, what's up? It's your boy Rawk, and I don't have much time left. You see, on March 31st this year, Nintendo is deleting the entirety of the Super Mario franchise. They're disabling the ability to upload levels to Super Mario Maker, Super Mario 35 is going offline, and they're gonna stop selling Super Mario 3D All-Stars! What am I gonna do? I need to spend my time wisely and pick one of these things to talk about before Mario is completely erased from our timeline. And seeing as I covered the entirety of the 3D Mario series last year, I should definitely cover Super Mario 3D All-Stars with what little time I have left. Oh, Jesus Christ!
Wow, this feels good. So you spend most of your life discerning a lot of your self-worth from the fact that you collect the original releases of games and Nintendo hits you with a big fuck you.
Well, there goes my self-esteem.
Super Mario 3D All-Stars. After being teased since the turn of the decade, this game finally released on September 18th, 2020, a mere 15 days after it was announced. What the hell? This is one of the shortest build-ups to release for any first-party Nintendo game, and there really isn't any development history behind this game either. It's a re-release of 3 games that have been out for decades.
Like, oh man, I wonder how they made this game. Now, if your government hasn't already informed you, I've talked at length about all 3 of these games before, so I'm going to be looking at the collection in terms of the improvements it makes to all of the games, and how well it does as a collection as a whole.
Here we have the first menu of the rest of our lives, and wow, it looks exactly how I expected it to. Can't tell if that's a good thing or a bad thing. We have each of the game's box arts displayed, and hovering over one displays a gameplay clip and what I assume is the blurb found on the back of the box, which is pretty neat. Next to every game we have their soundtrack, which I actually really appreciate. These games have some of the best and most iconic music of all time, and sure, you can obviously just listen to them on YouTube, but this is a collection celebrating the legacy of these games. I think it'd be wrong not to include the soundtracks. So, what else does this game do to celebrate the legacy of the series?
It does show a render of Mario when you enter a game.
The one major downside of this game is the lack of any substantial celebratory content. This game doesn't even contain the entire 3D history, so I feel like it would have been so easy for them to include some behind the scenes images, dev interviews, concept art, anything like that to make this feel more substantial. Something that makes this particularly disappointing is the giga leak that happened around this game's reveal. It's quite a long story, but to summarise, the source code for Super Mario 64 was leaked, and Luigi was discovered. Yes, L is real, and your dreams can come true. So many interesting things were revealed through this leak, and the fact that Nintendo refused to make any of this public knowledge themselves is really disheartening. They seem to have absolutely no regard for game preservation, and would rather see these incredibly interesting beta concepts and pre-release versions of their games be completely lost to time. So yeah, Nintendo could have done more.
Let's hope that isn't a recurring theme.
But enough of what the game doesn't have, let's take a look at what it does have, starting with Super Mario 64.
Hello!
Remember Banjo-Kazooie in the Rare Replay collection that was altered to be widescreen? Remember Banjo-Tooie in the Rare Replay collection that was altered to be widescreen? Remember Mario Sunshine in the same fucking collection that was altered to be widescreen? Remember Mario 64 in this collection that said fuck you and stayed in 4x3? Super Mario 64 maintains its original aspect ratio, which is absolutely baffling to me. The HUD textures have been updated, but that's it. And this, in conjunction with the aspect ratio, and the fact that this game is the only one in the collection that doesn't hit 1080p, my god, this game feels ancient. Visually, Mario 64 definitely shows its age in this collection, which is even more noticeable compared to the other 2 games. In a gameplay sense, however, this game feels incredible. As I've talked about before, playing this game with a Switch Pro controller compared to an N64 controller is absolutely blissful. It makes this game feel really good and weirdly modern. If it wasn't for the visuals, it would be legitimately hard to tell that this game is so old, as the gameplay is incredibly good in the Switch version, especially with the added rumble, which just helps more with the modernization. Doesn't mean the game doesn't fucking reek. This is also something I've talked about before, but man, this game can be an absolute bitch. Obviously this isn't an issue with the collection, but honestly, the improved control only works to enhance the frustration I feel with this game. The N64 version, I was way more lenient with. I cut it so much slack because I just assumed that the frustration came from playing entirely on its original hardware. But here, the controls are damn near perfect, the overall experience is so much more sleek. And I still fucking hate this game. Naturally, I'm exaggerating, but the frustrating elements of the game are so much more upsetting here because of how perfect the controls are. Despite how much better Mario 64 is in this collection, 3D All-Stars is the biggest contributor to my negative feelings towards this game.
I've already accepted that talking shit on 64 makes people want to kill me, so let's see how high I can get my wanted level. F*** this game!
Next, we have Super Mario Sunshine.
Oh boy, now this is what I'm talking about!
We've gone from 4x3 to 16:9, bitches! We've got a 1080p resolution, bitches! We've got shittier controls, bitches!
Playing so much Mario's made me lose my mind, bitches!
Spoiler alert, Super Mario Sunshine is the game in the collection that got the biggest graphical upgrade. The original game already looked incredible, especially for the time it came out, and now having it in widescreen with such a crisp resolution is absolutely stellar to me. It looks so good! Being able to see the beautiful locations of this game in glorious HD makes me incredibly happy, and it makes Isle Delfino feel so much more alive than it once did. Honestly, I could go on and on about how good Sunshine looks now, but I don't think anyone other than me would enjoy that, so let's move on to the gameplay. Now this is an interesting case. 64 and Galaxy have upgraded to an objectively better controller, but I'd argue that the GameCube controller and the Pro controller are on par in terms of how good they feel to use. So which is better for Sunshine? Well, in 3D All-Stars, the camera and FLUDD controls are inverted from what they were, which is to say they're uninverted. This is the worst puzzle. This was incredibly jarring to me, as I was so used to the original controls, but thankfully Nintendo patched in the ability to have the controls whichever way you want. Right after I was able to get used to the new controls, Nintendo, let's talk. The biggest change, however, is the FLUDD controls, as the Switch lacks the analog triggers of the GameCube controller, which has a massive impact on the gameplay. In the original, pushing down the triggers a little bit would only shoot a little bit of water, and a full throttle push would send water flying everywhere. In order to fix this issue on the Switch, they mapped each type of squirt to a button. I prefer this. It feels weird at first, but when you actually get down to business with this setup, it actually works really well. I think the main thing that makes it favourable for me is how easy this move is to pull off now. In the original, I was never really able to pull it off, because I could never manage to get the trigger all the way down with proper timing. But on the Switch, give the R button some loving and you're on your way to an empty tank and angry locals. Pressing the R button instead of XR also sees you standing in one place and aiming rather than running and gunning. While I will admit it can be frustrating using the wrong one accidentally, it actually feels more natural to have the two modes separated.
The one big disadvantage for me with the new control setup is the lack of knobs on the control stick, a sentence I find myself saying way too often.
This next point doesn't matter at all, and it purely comes down to personal preference. But man, it just doesn't feel as good without the nubs. You see, the GameCube controller had grooves that the analog stick would just slide right into, which made pulling off moves like the spin jump way easier, and way more satisfying. The Switch lacks the grooves, and while it isn't necessarily harder to pull off the spin jump, the tactile feel is completely gone, which is kind of upsetting.
Both of these controllers have pros and cons when compared to each other, and looking purely from this perspective, it's interesting to see which version of the game is for you based purely on the controls. But Nintendo patched in full GameCube controller support, so fuck the last 5 minutes of my life. Finally, we have Super Mario Galaxy, and man, this game is kind of conflicting in a control sense. In a graphical sense though? Are you fucking kidding me? This game is stunning! Super Mario Galaxy was already an impeccable looking game, but seeing it in 1080p is absolutely jaw-dropping. This game feels so at home on the Switch presentation wise, and while the jump from the original pales in comparison to Sunshine's, it's still incredibly impressive to see this game looking so good. But let's stop beating around the bush. Those controls. This is the first time the Galaxy has been playable on a traditional controller, and it feels amazing! The Wii Remote and Nunchuk setup works really well, don't get me wrong, but I'd take a Pro controller over that any day. The spin attack is mapped to a button now, and honestly, all feels right in my life. Well, ignore the fact that this game is about to cause the second timeline corruption around here, and in the past year, this feels incredible! These improvements do come at something of a cost, that being the pointer. In docked mode, it's alright. Naturally, it uses the Switch's gyro controls, which is definitely a decent alternative, aside from the fact that, much like most things to do with the Switch controllers, it drifts like crazy. This means you pretty much constantly have to reset your pointer, but this isn't a major inconvenience for me most of the time. Naturally, the gyro also lacks the accuracy of the Wii's IR controls, but that's to be expected. It's in handheld mode where the pointer suffers the most. You see, the other two games work perfectly in handheld mode, but with Galaxy, using gyro to aim wasn't really a feasible option, especially considering the pointer is on the screen the whole time. The alternative? Touchscreen controls. This is my favourite definition of not the best, because having to constantly take your hand off the Switch in order to use the pointer can be an absolute chore. It reminds me of the control issues with Kid Icarus Uprising for the 3DS, but obviously to a much lesser extent. If you have a flat surface to lie the Switch on, then great, this actually works really well in that case. But when the whole selling point of the console is being able to play whenever and wherever, it should feel good no matter where you play. Playing somewhere without a resting surface forces you to constantly shift the weight of the system between both hands and one, which can be really annoying.
I've been able to get used to the controls just fine, but I can honestly see the limitations in both modes of playing being a deal breaker for some people, which is really a shame.
As for me, this controller. I want to play this game on the Switch for the rest of my life!
Super Mario 3D All-Stars compiles 3 of the best games of all time into one well-made collection. These games are the most definitive they've ever been, and they've never felt better to play than they do right now. Sure, the lack of extra content is a bit disappointing, but I'd still say this collection is worth the money, and is a great way to experience some of the greatest adventures Mario has ever been on. And when they finally add Galaxy 2 as DLC after the collection is out of circulation, it will finally feel complete. Like, come on, am I really expected to believe that Galaxy 2 isn't coming? I wasn't born yesterday, a week ago maybe, but I can sniff Nintendo's plans from a mile away. As soon as the collection isn't available for purchase anymore, they'll add Galaxy 2 as a giant f*** you for people who didn't take the plunge. People will f***ing hate them for it, but I'll be too happy enjoying the game on the go to give a piss, which is really the part of the collection that most justifies the purchase. Now let's talk about how steeped in controversy this damn thing was. From the millisecond this collection was revealed, people were pissed. For the most part, the emulation looked to be tiptoeing on the narrow edge of being a direct port. Some texture work had been improved, whoop-de-fucking-do, but outside of that and Sunshine being in widescreen, the games were damn near indistinguishable from the versions on their base consoles. I mean, come on. 64 is still in 4x3. I know I've already bitched about this, but that is just repulsive! The price also made people struggle to sleep at night, but honestly, I don't really care about the price all that much. Buying the 3 games separately currently costs way more than the collection does, and the versions in this collection are the most definitive these games will ever be. Kind of. But none of these issues compare to one of the most scary things Nintendo has done in recent years.
The game will be available for a limited time until the end of March 2021.
Nope, I'm not dealing with that today. Yes, Nintendo decided it would be funny to limit the release of the game, and as someone who is mere minutes away from this game no longer existing, I can confidently say it's not fucking funny, Nintendo! This is definitely a topic I'm going to talk more in depth about another time, but suffice it to say, no. Artificially limiting the release of legacy content on the Switch at a time when people had been absolutely begging for more of it, all for the sake of capitalizing on FOMO, is something I'd expect from EA or Activision, not Nintendo. It sets a scary precedent that I hope to high heavens doesn't continue. And the worst thing is, it fucking worked. 8 million sales and counting for 3D All-Stars, which isn't really a surprise if you ask me, but Nintendo's probably looking at that number and twiddling their mustaches nefariously. Please don't do that. And yet, despite all of the issues that this collection has, it's one of my favourite games that Nintendo has ever released. The fact that I can play these games with the ease and comfort that the Switch provides makes me so happy, and in all honesty, having them on the Switch makes me way more likely to replay them again and again and again. Now please, give the Paper Mario series the same treatment. Re-release the first 3 games on Switch and give us their soundtracks. Dear God, please!
Well, that was Super Mario 3D All-Stars, and man, what a neat collection. Sure, some people would consider it to be the definition of underwhelming, but as someone who loves all 3 of these games to absolute death, this was one of my highlights of the past year. But I guess none of that matters anyways, because this game is going to be completely gone, erased from our timelines in... Fuck! There's still so much left for me to do! Play Luigi Galaxy again, listen to all of the credits themes, play the Machingo Machine again because fuck you! No! Oh, you son of a